Welcome to the weekend edition of the Fast Five Business News by Fear and Greed. I'm Michael Thompson, and hello, Jennifer Duke.
Hello.
Now, Jen, on weekdays, it's all about the Fast Five, the top 5 business stories in 5 minutes. On the weekend, though, we still keep it to just 5 minutes, but we're going to pick out the biggest story of the week, the most remarkable story, the sleeper story, one that's kind of flying under the radar a little bit, and then our favourite story. So let's jump straight into it. For me, there's only one biggest story in Australia this week. People aren't talking about the economy or reporting season. They're talking about the Matildas. They might have lost the semi-final to England, but they did the following. They smashed TV records. More than 7 million people watching the semi-final. They got the entire country excited about football, regardless of their traditional code allegiances. They changed the story forever about women's sport in Australia. They inspired a generation, maybe more than one, maybe 2 or 3 generations will kind of look at this and go, you know what, I can do something like that too. They put pressure on businesses to back women's sport if they want to be seen in that environment. They put even more pressure on all sporting codes to realise the enormous potential of women's sport and for the money to then flow accordingly. They did all of those things. But above all else, they gave us a really, really good time. What an extraordinary World Cup. I think this is the biggest sporting story, obviously, of the year, but it's also the biggest general story of the week.
I think it was a very huge story, but my biggest story of the week was National Cabinet and its housing outcome with the states and territories. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese met with state and territory leaders, and they came up with a national planning reform blueprint with a new target of 1.2 million extra homes over the next 5 years. Not only that, but there were practical changes made for renters, including minimum standards for homes, nationally consistent no-grounds eviction rules, and a limit of rent increases to once a year. You have to combine this with Albanese's Help to Buy scheme for first home buyers. This is a shared equity scheme that was part of his election platform, and he finally announced that it's kicking in for 2024.
Yeah, big story this week. What was your most remarkable one? Because I think you were still kind of looking in the politics space.
The most remarkable to me is the ongoing rift within the coalition at a federal and state level on the Indigenous voice to Parliament. So federal opposition leader Peter Dutton is opposed to constitutional change for the voice, but New South Wales Liberal leader Mark Speakman has revealed that he's going to vote yes. He said this is his position simply because the potential rewards outweigh the risks, and it will go some way to dealing with one of Australia's biggest policy failures, which is poor outcomes for Indigenous Australians. The New South Wales opposition isn't making it mandatory for state MPs to take any particular position, but Speakman's in pretty good company because the only Liberal Premier, Tasmania's Jeremy Rockliff, is also supporting the voice, as is ACT opposition leader Elizabeth Lee. And the federal picture is getting murkier. Dutton's been campaigning against enshrining the voice in the Constitution, describing it as risky and saying he prefers a legislated voice instead, which would mean that governments can change it without needing to go back to a national vote. Nationals leader David Littleproud has been sceptical about this idea, so you can really see the coalition having some problems.
Yeah, it's getting really, really messy, isn't it? Look, most remarkable for me this week is all about reporting season. Not all the results because we've had so many in the last week. But what I think is remarkable is the way some of these results aren't just numbers. They're stories about what people are doing, the way behaviour is changing, and the real life trends. Look at Ingham's Group, which is the country's largest poultry producer. Big increase in profit because consumers are shifting towards cheaper cuts of meat like chicken to offset cost of living pressures. Super Retail Group owns Rebel and BCF and Super Cheap Auto. Best performing category for the group, auto maintenance, because people are doing it themselves. They're looking after their own vehicles. Treasury Wine Estates, they had a drop in earnings across the arm of the business that sells their cheaper labels like Pepperjack and Lindemans. Again, cost of living. Those who can least afford it are saving cash where they can. At the other end of the business, the demand for premium wine stays high. So you get this very clear kind of picture of those who are battling the cost of living up against those who are probably more immune to those forces. Ties in then with what we heard from NAB this week. There's a small number of people falling behind in their home loan repayments. Same with CBA, same with Bendigo and Adelaide Bank. Why? Because this is the last thing people will fall behind on. They'll make other cuts first. They'll eat cheaper meat and cut back on the wine, everything just to keep a roof over their heads. You look below the surface of some of these results we're hearing this season, and I think it tells a very, very human story, which I think is really quite remarkable. The sleeper story this week, what was it for you?
So my biggest sleeper story is what's happening to the Australian dollar. So there's been some pretty awful economic data out of China and weaker than expected jobs data in Australia this week, and the currency sell-off has begun. All of this has led Commonwealth Bank of Australia experts to warn that the Aussie dollar could fall below US 60 cents. This is a level that hasn't been seen since before the pandemic. The Aussie dollar already sank to 9-month lows over the week, so it's clearly on a downward trajectory. Now, weaker Aussie dollar makes it super expensive to import goods, driving up prices and pushing up inflation. We're already already in a cost of living crisis, and this week we've seen petrol prices push up again to year highs. This is also a time when our central bank says we're on a narrow path to be able to balance cooling but not crash the economy while bringing down inflation. An extra rate hike from any lingeringly high inflation would put many borrowers in a lot more pain and would add downward pressure to the economy at a time that our major trading partner is also lagging.
Yeah, that is a great sleeper story. I might move straight on to the favourite story because very quickly, any story about planes is an immediate winner for me. This week we had Germany's Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock on her way to Australia. She had a lot to do here, meetings, speeches. She was going to Fiji, New Zealand. Her plane broke down, and just because they couldn't get onto commercial flights, they couldn't do anything else, they had to cancel the entire trip. Since when has a plane breaking down been able to derail an entire kind of diplomatic mission? I just thought that was a little bit extraordinary, and I thought it was my favourite story of the week. What was yours?
So my favourite story of the week has got to be the vast improvement in our national gender pay gap is now the smallest it has ever been. The Workplace Gender Equality Agency, which is tasked with improving these outcomes, unveiled the narrowest pay gap on record in Australia at 13%. That's 0.3 percentage point improvement on February. Yes, women still only earn 87 cents to every dollar that a man makes, but this is a huge step up. And what was even more exciting is that these improvements have been driven by rising incomes of women in traditionally female-dominated industries. That's things like education and training, healthcare, and social assistance. The data's from May, so it doesn't reflect all the increases either for sectors like aged care.
Yeah, that is a good story, isn't it? There we go. 5 minutes and pretty much everything you need to know in the world of business. Thank you, Jen.
Thanks, Michael.
We'll be back on Monday morning with the top 5 business stories in 5 minutes. Don't forget to hit follow and join us online on Instagram and LinkedIn, Facebook and X. I'm Michael Thompson, and this is the Fast 5 Business News by Fear and Greed.